A philosopher says, nations are not literally persons. They have no thoughts or feelings, and literally speaking, they perform no actions. Are you guys aware that the word literally now in some dictionaries has a secondary meaning, which is figuratively? Yeah, that is pretty bad. Okay, anyways, nations are not literally persons. I mean, they are figuratively persons. They're not literally persons. Okay, they have no thoughts or feelings, and literally speaking, they perform no actions. Thus, they have no moral rights or responsibilities. Says you. Thus indicates a conclusion of the argument. That means I get to argue with that part. And so I'm going to accept the premise that a nation is not literally a person, and I'm going to accept the premise that they have no thoughts or feelings and that they, literally speaking, perform no actions. I accept all of that. But I can't accept the leap to, therefore, they have no moral rights or responsibilities, because you have assumed that if you're not a person, have no thoughts or feelings, and perform no actions, then that automatically means that you have no moral rights or responsibilities. That's just a leap. There's a missing premise of the argument. Odds are good that that's the answer to the question. But let's see. But no nation can survive unless many of its citizens attribute such rights and responsibilities to it, for nothing else could prompt people to make the sacrifices national citizenship demands. Obviously, then, a nation blank. Again, one of these fill-in-the-blank things. I'm looking for a boring, obvious, conservative completion to the argument. What are they trying to prove here? They're trying to prove something like, I mean, since it's a premise that no nation can survive unless many of its citizens attribute these rights and responsibilities to the nation. I think at this point I have to actually accept them. They did say thus, which made me think it's a conclusion. But the way they're structuring the argument now, and because it's a fill-in-the-blank question, I think I have to accept that as a premise of the argument, that nations actually don't have moral rights or responsibilities. And in that case, then, we have a premise that nations don't actually have moral rights or responsibilities, but the nation won't survive unless the citizens believe that the nation does have those rights or responsibilities. And I think when you add all that up, I'm looking for an answer something like, hey, if we're going to survive, we have to lie to our citizens. Or maybe not lie. We have to, our citizens need to believe something false about the nation in order for the nation to survive. That seems to be, if I accept all of the premises, that's, I think, where they're going with that. So let's see. Which one of the following most logically completes the philosopher's argument? A nation cannot continue to exist unless something other than the false belief that the nation has moral rights motivates its citizens to make sacrifices. That is like so complicated that I would just assume that all it is garbage. So I would just move on. B. Obviously then, a nation cannot survive unless many of its citizens have some beliefs that are literally false. That's close to what I predicted, and I do think that adds up. They've said it's literally false that a nation does not have rights and responsibilities. They've also said that if the citizens don't believe that the nation does have rights and responsibilities, which would be a false belief, that the nation won't survive. I think B has to be true based on what the philosopher has already said, so I think the answer for 16 is going to be B. I'm just curious, did people pick A? You did? You know what that's called? That's called picking an answer that you don't know what the fuck it means. Because I don't know what that means. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's overstated. But I will say, it's so complicated that I think your default there needs to be like, probably not, and move on to the other answer choices. And find something cleaner and easier and obvious. It is a common thing that people do, is pick answers that they don't understand. And it's one thing that an expert would never do. There are answer choices that I don't understand, and I will not pick those. Yes?
Do the LSAT tend to make the right answer choices not complicated?
No, it depends on the difficulty of the question. I mean, there can be, it is sometimes hard to understand why the right answer is right. You have to parse, sometimes you have to parse the right answer. But my thing is, my general principle is this. If I feel like I have to work hard to make an answer the answer, it's probably not the answer. You know, if it takes too long for me to explain why it's right, I would presume that it's wrong. I already have an 80% presumption that it's wrong. And if now I'm like trying to figure it out and I'm like, I just am not in the business of helping answer choices. So when I read something like A and I'm going to have to do some gymnastics in order to make that fit, I would not even waste time doing the gymnastics, and instead I would move on to the other answers. And so this is an example here of one that I would have gotten right, and I would have gotten it right more quickly, I think, than most people, because I wouldn't even have bothered making sense of A. There are answers on the test that are basically all the words in the argument blended up and just barfed out into like, just all it is just the words, all whatever. And they, sure, they have a meaning, or you could get some meaning from reading it, but that meaning doesn't have to be anything at all related to the right answer. So when I see something that's like, I read it and I'm like, huh? That's just like, oh, I'm going to read all the other answer choices before I come back and try to make that one make sense. Now that is not what I'm doing when I read the argument itself. When I read the argument itself, if there's some complicated shit, I'm going to stay there until I figured it out. Because the argument part is gold. You have to understand what the argument says. You don't have to understand what all the wrong answers say. You have to understand the argument, you have to understand the question, and you have to understand the correct answer.